And she kept it real. And I still have all my awards and stuff from Charles Houston. Lot of artifacts from the old days. People said I'm a hoarder, but I kept everything. I did have a brick of Charles Houston when it burnt down. So I remember when the school caught on fire, and I'm standing there, and it was like these bricks was falling there. So we standing out there like we can put a fire out with a water hose, but we tried. So the people on the block, they had the water hose. My father, we gonna have to get out because the bricks and the fire was just flaring out, and I remember this brick, and it just landed, and I threw some water. I said, I'm gonna keep that brick, and I can't find my brick and stuff, but I did have one of the original bricks from Charles Houston. So it kind of hurt when they demolished the school because it was a part of history. You don't have Charles Houston's not there anymore. Parker Gray's not there anymore. And it's like, it's like people trying to erase away the history, even with T.C. Williams. I understand the name change and everything, but it's like you Google certain people out of T.C. and they say Alexandria City Public School. So Noah Lyles, and he's a track star now and everything. He graduated from T.C. Williams, not Alexandria City Public School. And I said, it is different. When you change the name, you change the whole school system. Because T.C. Williams is known as a powerhouse throughout the region. So even when I go to college and people ask you where you're from, I say, oh, I'm from Alexandria. Then also, remember the Titans? Everybody know where you come from, T.C. Williams. So even doing research with the TC, and it's a lot of stuff they have gotten away with. It's nothing that says T.C. Williams and Alexandria no more. They want to do history on some of the black schools that we grew up with, because it was a lot of history there. So like I said, busing, we part of the getting bus. That was different. Now you can go to school in your neighborhood or whatever. The local carryouts we had, everybody had a mom and pop store, so I was right in a corner from the blue and white carryout. And the blue and white carryout is still there. Everybody goes there and get those chicken sandwiches or whatever. They open up at 5, and I think they close at 2. And it's believe it or not, it's the same menu, but so when Miss Rose had it, she had different little things, hamburgers and hot dogs. They don't sell all that around there. You get the chicken, the beans, and the little rice and the Salisbury steak, the same thing. And I worked for the United States Post Office, so I got the pleasure of working around the corner from where I grew up in. So I started as a mail carrier, and I ended up being one of the branch manager, and I have worked all over Northern Virginia and stuff. But it's actually when I had to deliver mail in Alexandria, and I was laughing because God told me, well, you got to learn the route or whatever. I said, just give me the mail. I go, and I would up and down the streets, and I would finish so quickly. And he like, I don't know what you're doing. I said, well, when you know the neighborhood and you know the shortcuts, you can get you everything real quick and everything. But like I said, it has been a joy growing up in Alexandria. I wouldn't trade my memories here for anything in the world. Like I said, I learned a lot of people, and we're family oriented, and you don't see that in schools nowadays. So I live right now living down here off of Elmwood Drive in Alexandria, and we've been there probably about 15 years, and I can tell you all them people out there in the neighborhood, I would probably say I only know 2 families. So the families today are not close where I could tell you on the block where everybody lived at. Back in the day, everybody was close. You go from house to house, people was friendly. You can't do that today. So it's like I see people walking, and you speak to people, and everybody just kind of look at each other. And I'm the type of person, hi, how you doing? How's your day? I don't have to know you. You don't have to know me, but you speak when people go by, and that's what we were taught up as coming up. And you reach out and you help people. You see a lot of homelessness in Alexandria. It wasn't like that growing up. Some people may have not had homes, but guess what? The churches will help take care of people, and they still do to this day. And like I said, growing up, you had all the black churches in Alexandria. Thankfully, they are still here. It's a lot of history. If you go to each one of those churches, and they could tell you from the pastors. And like I said, I was a product of Mount Jerusalem Baptist Church, and I joined church under Reverend Henry Houston. So Reverend Houston used to take all his kindergarten. When you went to Sunday school class, it was packed. You go there today, you don't see that. But you had to go to Sunday school, so you can do your little cartoons on Saturday. Sunday, you in church. You go from Sunday school They church service. Then they always have something after church. So Sunday was spent pretty much all day in church. Then you come home, you have your nice Sunday dinner, and you relax and then go play in the neighborhood. My father would take us, and I had to give it to my father. He makes sure that he took us out to see our relatives, that's the ones that's in the area. But it was like Christmas growing up. My dad would take us over to D.C. and we just watched the little mannequins in the windows and all that. We walked all over D.C. And he always made sure that we went to the monument, to the museums and stuff like that. And I can tell you my favorite thing with my father, he would get us always popcorn and this orange drink. So like I said, Dad did a lot with us and all that. And I said, bless his heart. But, my father, by him having his own custodial business, he had a lot of the guys I went to school with. My dad gave everybody a job. He didn't care. I'm gonna give you something to do. Just come on over there. And some of them last, some of them didn't. Cause Daddy working hard with us, cutting grass, and I grew up. We always had to work coming up. So, we had the school activities. My father, he like I said, he had his own custodial business. So he had all these banks and churches within the city of Alexandria, and you would see us out there on a Saturday, hate cutting grass, and I'm out there cutting grass at a church, and I'm like, I should be doing this and all that. And I said, when I get big, now you think I push a lawnmower? I look at that lawnmower, I'll pay somebody to come cut that grass and stuff. But back then, had no choice, you had to do it. And I was like, what was my pay? My pay was like 50 cents, or I get lucky sometimes I would get $1 a week. But I was rich. Back then, $1 a week was rich. And we, like I said, we had to, he started me as like being that little entrepreneur. So I figured 6th grade, I started making money. So when I got out from school, I would actually go to neighbors' houses and ask them, do you want anything from the store? And they would give me a little grocery list. And I'd go up to back then with the Bradley Grove Metro, that was the Safeway store. So I would go get groceries. I go back and forth lugging groceries. I saved enough. I got me a little red wagon and a little red flyer wagon, and I would pick up and deliver. I was doing Uber and DoorDash back in the day, if you want to call it. That's what it was and stuff. But I had the wagon, and you learn things and stuff. And so it got to a point in my life. So when I graduated from TC, I went to Norfolk State University, and it was a big difference because I went to HBCU school, and I know I was smart at TC Williams, but that was the hardest school I ever went to, keeping up with them grades and all that. And you got a lot of history, you got to meet a lot of people, and I saw things different when I got to high school. And I'm like, realizing things that was going on in the past. You could have got money from this, you could have got money, you could have sued them, discrimination and all that. But we did, like I said, we wasn't taught black and white. And today, people they try to make a difference and all that. They don't want you to learn about your history. I tell people, you got history of each culture, got their own history and all that. And I said I was fortunate enough to be there when some of this stuff was going on, so I can reflect and tell my nieces and my nephews, look, this is what we did back in the day. Things happen. So if you try to erase away your past, you'll never learn about your future, because your past is going to help you get by in your future. So I tell anybody, look up the book, look in your history books, try to preserve all the history that you can, because once your parents are gone and you kind of lost something. I'm lucky, my mother's 96 years old, and she still fights and still got that good memory, and she could tell you about a lot of things up in Alexandria, and some things you don't want to hear, but Mama she just go on about this and that, especially when it comes to all of the black churches, the ministers that, some of them, a whole bunch of them are no longer here, but she could recite it, who's at what at church, what happened in Charles Houston, Parker Gray, Minnie Howard. She worked at St. Joseph. She got a little job up there, and my mother was the neighborhood babysitter. So in the morning, by us being on that corner, so back then you couldn't come in school until the bell rung. When the bell rung, they let everybody in. But, parents would send their kids to school. You ain't had to worry about nobody bothering kids. Everybody walked to school and stuff. So my mother had this thing. Well, they standing out in the corner. I'd bring them on in here, and she would feed all these kids. And my living room used to be full of kids in the morning, eating cereal. I'm like, then sometimes they came for lunch, and they came back for dinner too. But we've shared many meals with people, and it's still like that today. You can walk into my mother's house, and she gonna make sure you get something to eat. That's just her, bless her heart, and all that. But you can't, people don't do that nowadays. But like I say, growing up in Alexandria, I wouldn't trade it. My childhood memories, the history of Alexandria, from the parades to kindergarten to the high schools, the neighborhoods. So like I said, Alexandria is not the charming neighborhood that we grew up. Matter of fact, look kind of like New York City. You be putting all these high rises up in the middle of the blocks, and why? And there should be single family homes and stuff. And I understand about the growth and everything. So who would believe that the houses we grew up in on Patrick and whatever, in this neighborhood now, they worth $1 million. And I think my father, he back in the day probably paid $25,000 for that house, and it's $1 million now. So changes, growth, I understand all that and stuff, but right now living in Alexandria is probably more expensive. You couldn't afford to live back in the city now if you had to move back in here. And I said they just don't know what they missing, but they got expensive. But like I said, I have my memories, I have pictures, and like I said, my family called me, you can hoard everything. I got books from Charles Houston. I still got my books from Charles Houston Elementary School. And hey, why you hang on to that? Gary, throw that stuff away. I said, but it was mine. So, we had these, the books, and everybody know Run, Dick, Run, Run, Sally, Run. I got those books and stuff, and they probably worth a fortune now, but I don't know, I had to look into that. But yeah, just things we kept, and I was telling my classmates, because I'm working on reunion, and we started pulling out stuff, and I had to pull all these yearbooks out. And they're like, you got all the yearbooks and stuff? I said, yeah. I said, that's what you paid for them for. I kept all mine and stuff. But I had pictures of, we do all these group photos when we were in elementary school, and I just pulled them out, and they were like, well, who was that? And I'm trying to tell them, this still George Jones, that's Eric Naffer, Betty Knight. And they looking at all these pictures and stuff. And I said, this is us when we were in the 1st and 2nd grade, and I could still remember all the people in that picture. And I said, it's like that in the neighborhood. Like I said, everybody was close. So my siblings and I still see some of my neighbors, and we just close. So, when one passed away, and it hurts because we grew up with everybody. You grew up with the parents and all that. So even going around to see some of the mom and pop stores, and all of the mom and pop stores are gone except for Blue and White. Little Jim's Carryout used to be right here on Pelican Street. So, Friday night, you know what you're going to eat Friday night. You either go to Little Jim's, get that fish box, or you go to Holly Farms, which is over there by it was the Safeway in Suffolk Glee Road. You go to Holly Farms, get Holly Farms chicken, or you're going to go up to Geno's and get that Geno's Giant. So, like I said, a lot of the kids, after the football games, basketball games, everybody headed Geno's. That man made his money because it was full of TC folks. That was the hang spot. And then while you at TC, we would sneak over and drive up. When I started driving, we'd run down to Jack in the Box or that Roy Rogers and stuff. And, those were some of the just eating places. We just hung out. We had a good time. And I told her, I ride past through TC. I've been through the new part of TC and everything. I said, the way they had the school now, I said, the band room we had our own section. We just off to the corner and everything. And I like how the new school is and stuff, but they changed the whole thing. It just don't look, it's nothing to remember of TC. It's not TC no more. It's Alexandria City Public Schools and stuff. And I can understand changes, but don't erase your history. Learn from your history. Like I said, I'm glad they putting us in museums, because I'm also with the Eastern Star, so I'm out of Esther Chapter 123 out of Alexandria. We've been around for 116 years old. So we have a lot of history there. With my dad was in the Masons and stuff. He's with Occasion Lodge #1 out of, like I said, Alexandria. And they've been around for a long time. And even the memories in there, we got pictures in there. MacArthur Myers, he's a part of that Universal Lodge and stuff. And MacArthur Myers, if you know him, he's a historian. I call him man knows everything. He's a historian. He can recite Alexandria just like that. And he still works with, I think, within the city and all that. But like I said, being here, being in this library brings like a lot of memories. And they have changed this library since I grew up and all that. We didn't have this room that we're in now. We didn't have. It was just one big open space. You had still had the upstairs, and they had a children's section, and you could always find refuge in the library. So if you didn't have any place to go, and mind you, Miss Gladys just let everybody come up in here. Her thing was, you gonna learn here when you come here. She give everybody a book. You sit down and learn to read, and she would do your homework with you and everything. And she was just a joy to be around. So out of Miss Gladys and all her sisters were school teachers, the whole family. So you had Miss Gladys, you had Miss Penn, you had Miss Christine. I think Miss Christine is the only one still left, Hopkins and stuff. But all of her sisters, siblings, they were school teachers. So you're going to get one of them and all that. And I'm like, man, if you can get through that family, you can get through life. And it's just like that, because Miss Penn, if Miss Penn didn't get you, and I tell my girlfriend Sandra, I said, you couldn't get away with nothing because all your aunts are school teachers. She said, yeah, and they always telling on me. They always. Kids was coming there. You know what? I don't think he mind and stuff, because he like, they just fill up the arena, because, we just sitting in there or whatever. And a lot of us couldn't afford the movies and stuff, but, we had the skating ring to go to. So you looking around at Alexandria, it's no place for these children to go and hang out in, because now you had to pay to go to rec. It was free back in the day, but you don't have the friendly recreation centers where, all the kids don't go in the neighborhood. They don't have this nowadays. Everything is at a cost. You got to pay for this and pay for that, but they should never charge children for anything. I don't care if you got a brand new recreation center. If any child wants to come up in there, let them kids come up there and play. Let them use the swimming pool. Well, you got to pay, and I know they're trying to make the money and stuff, but you can't make money off a child. So if you don't teach children, and like I said, a lot of the adults back then, they spent time with the kids, teaching them this, teaching them that. We had the mentors of the family. We had Lucky Elliott. He always did the football, and he had Mr. Lee on the baseball, and after school, that was just, you out there at these rec centers learning how to play basketball. And we had so many prominent youths playing basketball, and especially class of 77, undefeated, still undefeated at TC, the only ones. And I said, I see some of them now, and some of them got scholarships, but back then they kind of, I'm going to tell you now, they used them to, okay, we're going to get on the map because these guys are so good that they didn't have to go to class. But when they got ready to go to college, they couldn't make that change, because guess what? You don't have nobody to do your work for. You won't actually have to go on college. And a lot of them flunked out or whatever. They came back, didn't like it or whatever. I said, that's because y'all was always into sports, and it was another side of sports. So you can't have all sports and not educate your child. They got to get it got to be even. So like I said, now kids, they just need to learn. Pick up a book. If I had my choice today, I would get rid of them laptops, PlayStations. Get out there and play. Learn how to play, because guess what? It builds your social skills up. So you see these kids today, every time you look at somebody shooting this, they want to be gang members or beat somebody up instead of working for it. So, okay, this one got a nice pair of tennis shoes on. I'm going to go take his tennis shoes. You wanted something back then. You had to work to get that. So you save your pennies, and you actually, when you can buy your own stuff, it makes you feel good. I don't want to take nothing from nobody. If I can't earn it or get it or save for it, I don't deserve it. And that's what we were taught. But see, kids nowadays, the parents, they don't correct them. They give them everything. So everything is on the silver platter, and they don't think, even kids today, they don't have chores. Give them chores. Empty trash. You got to take this. You got to do this before you can get that. And I think if the parents would just go back to that, because I'm all for these kids, and I look at now, you so many kids with autism, and they all on these spectrums and all that. And I'm like, got to be in the food, because we didn't have that coming up. I mean, we had a few just a few of the kids, but not like they have today. So I'm like looking at it, and I said, I see it so much in schools and stuff now, and I'm like wondering. I said, is it in the food, or because I know they change stuff, and what the parents eating, or they're not eating healthy, even going to the school lunches and the stuff that they feeding the kids today, they giving the kids today with all the sugar and all that. I said, I said, bring that plate back, burn that energy. They might learn, and that's my thing. And like I said, it's fun, and like I said, the memories of Alexandria. I could take you around, give you a tour, but like I said, learn your history, learn your history. Because tomorrow is not promised and stuff, but I want to be able to look back and reflect. Now, like I said, I kept I got my diaries and everything that I wrote as a child. I kept a little diary. So, you out there, I got books on everybody. Everything that happened in Alexandria, I make little notations. I got those books. And like I said, I'm just a hoarder of facts and everything. And I believe we was talking about the little encyclopedias and everything, and I sitting there. I think we still got that. I'm gonna look when I get home. I think we still got those encyclopedias, but Dad brought us the encyclopedia set, and I remember going through them books. I was so proud because we had our set, and even when it came to like burial plots, I remember the undertakers. Everybody going around, hey, get your grave, get your grave. I said, well, we ain't going nowhere now, and all that, and I look in the cemetery now, and all your neighbors are buried together and stuff. And I find it amazing because, when my dad buried there was so many neighbors in the neighborhood that's buried out there by him. I said, that man went around, and I can say, I know I've got a burial spot next to your mother and this one here. And I'm looking at the cemetery. I said, we together at the cemetery too. So especially on that south side, and it's everybody else, Henry, that's down there or whatever. And you could just, it's like you back in the neighborhood. So you had the home here, then you had your heavenly home, and we buried down at the cemetery together. And even going through the cemetery, sometimes I walk the cemetery a lot and whatever, and cleaning graves off and everything. And you just see it's a lot of memories out there from the people from the Civil War, school teachers, everybody that you grew up with, and and I respect the cemeteries, and I see a lot of people just walk through there, and I said, I wonder, do they think whose grave they stepping on, or do they know this person and know the person's history and stuff? Because I tell people it's a lot of history. I tell people it's a lot of history in the cemetery. If you ever want to walk it, you learn something. I say, walk through the cemetery and see them dates on those tombstones, and Google a person. And like I said, my advice to people: write your family history down, know where you came from, and know where you're going. Because, like I said, without your past, you can't have a future. So you, like I said, you have to learn, and go back through your archives, through your history books. I'm quite sure that schools kept yearbooks from each. Go through them yearbooks and look back and see what they were doing, and let it reflect and let it lead you to what you want to do today. So, like I said, these kids have a lot of opportunities in school, especially at TC. I'm looking; they got a little recording studio up there, and I'm jealous. I'm jealous. I actually want to go back to TC. They let us take a few courses up in there. They have everything there. And we didn't have that coming up. So like I said, we had to invent a lot of things and learn a lot of things. But kids today have a lot of opportunity, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So they in the rap videos, or I'm not going to school. They just want to hang out and get stuff the easy way. But people learn your history and all that. And that's about it. So like I said, I could talk to you. We'd be going on all day, and all night. And I hope that whatever I told you kind of helps a little bit.